You're listening to the Real Estate Runway podcast, powered by Quattro Capital, where we are all about alternative business and investment strategies to help you amplify life and maximize wealth. Here's your host, the recovering engineer turned multifamily investor, Chad Sutton.
Friends, I am super excited for you to hear today's episode. We have a great friend of mine, Jennifer Ives Grimson, who is the host of the Micro Empires podcast, fellow real estate investor, and honestly owns the mantra that you don't have to be wealthy to build wealth. This amazing woman has lost everything and built back not once, but twice. Without further ado, let's get into it. All right. Welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Runway podcast. I am joined today with Jennifer Grimson. She's a great friend, an investor partner, and has one of the most amazing stories I think I've ever heard. She is a single mother who has lost everything not once, but twice. She has rebuilt twice, but rebuilt to 1.4 million in income producing investments with W-2 and a little bit of grit, or a lot of bit of grit. We'll let her tell us. And my favorite thing about her is she is an advocate for the notion that you don't have to be wealthy to build wealth. Without further ado, Jennifer, how are you doing, dear?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Pleasure to have you on the show. I'm happy to finally be able to return the favor from being on your show, weeks and weeks ago. But
yes,
I think your interview is going to be much better than mine because I'm excited to let the audience hear your story.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, Jim, what I'd love to do is maybe spend a couple of minutes, and I'd love to hear your story, right? And I don't think there's any question I can ask that will let you tell it better. So without further ado, I'd love to just hear how you lost everything twice and what you learned from it.
Really? How does somebody do that? Not once, but twice. So yes, I lost everything twice, which means for me meant no car, no job, no place to live, no money, Chapter 13 bankruptcy, and 2 children to raise. And my mistakes, I say this in my show, it doesn't actually matter how you get there, but I always share how I got there. My mistakes weren't that I spent a lot of money, had expensive clothes, big house. It's that my mistakes were relational. So I have an ex-husband, my first husband, who sued me 25 times in 10 years. I racked up over $500,000 in attorney's fees. And truly the second time is also due to that. But I had also entered into another relationship where I had turned my financial well-being over to someone else. So when I say it's relational, it's because I didn't protect me and I abandoned myself, which I talk about a lot. And that's really important for anybody to know, but I think especially women, because women, you typically will take on the parenting role, the nurturing role, and may or may not. I mean, statistically, they don't have as much say in the finances, although they should, because they outperform men by 40%. So
I love that. And you know what? My company, I think I'm one of 2 guys in it, right? So we
yes.
buy into that.
Yes. And women are slower to invest, but are higher performers in investing. So anyway, that's my story in a nutshell. That's how it happened. And that's how I ended up there.
I love it. And so that had to have taught you a thing or two about financial literacy along the way, right? Can you go into that a little bit?
It had to have, right? Yeah, I think my journey, like financial literacy isn't even a phrase or a slogan that I knew probably until the last 10 years. And I probably didn't even know it till halfway through my own education in it. Yes, the first thing it taught me, and the second time, I just knew that I had to build small empires. That's why my show is called Micro Empires, for my own security, because I knew I could get a corporate job. I had a corporate job, always did usually. And I knew that I could earn over 6 figures, but I also knew that could be taken away. And that if that is all you have, that it could still devastate you. So I knew I was going to get a corporate job, but I knew that there are other ways to make money and have my money make money, but I didn't know how to do that. And that is the process that I began to learn. And honestly, I just did this today in another interview. The second time that I landed there, I was 41 years old. I was 44 before I rebuilt my credit. So really it was 44 to 47, 48 that I built up that 1.4 million. That's a pretty short period of time.
Yeah.
But the reason I talk about it is because I didn't come into a big bunch of money. I just manipulated the tools that I have, that most people have access to, but we don't know about how to manipulate them. So I had to learn to do that. And it was in short order, and it can be in short order. I think, especially if you have a W-2, to be frank. So
Yeah. I love what you said. I mean, I used to tell people when I was working in corporate America, you think you're secure, you're only ever 2 weeks away from termination. And if you're living, if that's your only stream of income, that could be financial ruin is only ever 2 weeks away. Right.
yes. And I
So,
see it every day with people that I consult with.
yeah.
My resume is up to date to this day. It will be up to date until the day I go in the ground. and my network is growing every single day, and I never stop. And that is what will save you. So, I love corporate America. It did well by me, but you can't rely on one thing ever.
Mm. So Jen, I'd love to hear about your money culture growing up. And that's something you talk about a lot on your show, Micro Empires, and why it's important to know what it is. Can you unpack that a little bit?
It's so yes, money culture is a big thing that I talk about. I ask every guest. So I've never been asked that question before.
I
Although
know it's fun being on the other side.
yeah, I wrote a blog about it, which hasn't been published yet, but it will be. And it was really telling. And I understand now why guests struggle with this. So my money culture is I was raised by two people who came from Boston. I'm from Boston area-ish, who grew up very poor, although they wouldn't consider that. They were each one of, in large families. They worked very hard. They experienced the Depression, and went into this military service. Both of them did. My mother went to secretarial school. My father went to the military. But it was just work hard, save, 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 save. And my dad was parking cars and getting a college degree. And my mother had 3 children in 3 years because she had my sister and twins the year after. So basically like having triplets. And then quickly thereafter, the rest of us came. There's 6 of us. So my folks, I grew up in a family where my dad was an engineer. So even though I grew up in a fairly, I would consider it a blue collar town, although now it's much more white collar, my dad was a white collar worker in engineering, which was, not what I was watching other kids have, but we lived a lifestyle of frugality. I never wanted for anything, but I also never asked for anything. And when I was 12, I started babysitting and found out I had a really good knack for that and turned that into a little business. And, I see this in the string with my guests now. And I'm like, oh, I did it too. I realized I was babysitting for this family. Probably I was 13, 14, something like that at this point. And I realized it's not harder to watch 4 kids or 6 kids as it is to watch 2 kids. If, you line them all, because I came from a big family. So everybody gets a snack. Everybody's got to do their homework. Everybody's got to get a bath. So I started doing that. I said, I'll go to one person's house. Everybody send me your kids. Instead of $1 an hour, I got $6 an hour. That was a lot of money for me. And then I quickly got into the restaurant business and did every job there. Ended up working 40 hours a week while in high school because I loved working and I loved money. I loved having the freedom of money. And I graduated from high school early because I never, big shock, 5'11", red hair. I didn't get asked out on a lot of dates, wasn't like super popular in high school. I was ready to be gone. So that was my money culture growing up, but definitely I didn't fear, we weren't poor. I never thought we were poor, none of that, but just this never use a credit card. Credit is bad. You have to work very, very hard, be conservative, save everything. So that's kind of how I grew up. But it did instill, I think my fear came when I married my first boyfriend, no shock. Right. And I met him, I was 21 and he was 30, and he had, I call it financial chaos. I moved into financial chaos. So someone who did not share my money culture at all. I was busy eating rice to survive, and he was busy running the credit card up to 20 grand. And that was just one of our problems, but that's an insurmountable problem if you can't sit down and work that kind of thing out.
That really is. And I guess What I love about that story you just told is you figured out economies of scale on your own, right? Going back to the babysitting thing without being taught.
Right.
It wasn't until later that you discovered, okay, maybe hoarding cash is not what I need to do. I need to be investing it, but you also walked into utter chaos, probably not knowing any better, right?
Oh yeah, money was not well, and it's interesting. I think back now after all the money conversations that I have today, and I remember talking to my mom when I was like 17 and saying, "Well, what was it about dad that you married him?" And she said, "Well, I thought, a list of things, but then one of them was I thought he'd be a good provider." And I remember at the time thinking, "Well, that's stupid. I mean, you should be on your own and whatever." And from a feminist point of view, I get that notion. I'm still that 17-year-old at heart. But the truth is, that's part of love. That's part of partnership. You do want to partner with somebody who wants to provide for you. That should go both ways. You don't want to partner with somebody who thinks about themselves first.
Yeah.
And especially if you ever want to have children and a family, I mean, it goes around. You got to lob the ball back and forth. You got to help each other. And that's not who I married into, but it was the least of my worries in that marriage. But it was part of the chaos and just the unhealthiness, the sickness, because money can be used to abuse, to withhold, um, to trap. And when you have your own money, or at least understand it, you always have a way out.
That is a beautiful segue to what I was trying to get out earlier on a follow-up question to your previous discussion. So speaking of getting out, you talked about how you manipulate the tools that are available to you that most people have access to and don't know how to manipulate. I've also played this game a little bit. I'd love to hear your take on that and, specifically what tools you manipulated and how others might do the same.
Yeah. So I had, like most people, put into a 401k. The second time I was rebuilding, I had a 401k, and my ex had actually liquidated it, unbeknownst to me. Long story. Listen to episode 3 and you can find out all about it if you want to know. But so when I started working again in the corporate America, the first thing I wanted to do was to double down on my 401k, or just to max it out. And I don't think I even really understood necessarily what I was doing. But somewhere along the way, after I purchased my home, after I joined a real estate investment group, I started to hear, I'm not really sure how I heard the first rumblings of this, but somehow I learned that you could borrow against a 401k. And when I say this to this day, even if I say it 7 or 8 times, people think I mean cash it out, liquidate, whatever. And that's when you hit your taxes and your penalties. If you are a corporate employee, you can call up your 401k and you could say, I would like to borrow. And they, depending on the 401k holder, may allow that or not. And there's a percentage of it that you can take. Mine was $22,000. And I always share all my numbers because it frustrates me when people come on shows and they're like, you're supposed to magically guess, what they've got or what they did.
It makes it relatable though, right? That's not a huge amount of money. Most of us probably have some access to that.
Right. And when I
Yeah.
think especially when, like, even my story, I had $1.4 million of income producing investments. I say that I didn't have $1 million. I also had $800,000 of debt, but they were,
Right.
they all had jobs. All those houses had jobs. But anyway, I called my 401k. I could borrow without penalty or tax, $22,000. First thing I did was I paid off my car. And the second thing I did was I paid off some debt that I had. Then you pay yourself back with a small interest rate, usually about 4%, through your paycheck. So it's a tiny amount, and you could pay, and you're paying yourself, by the way. So that was painless coming out of my paycheck. Didn't even notice it. Once I paid it back, I did it again. And I bought a second house with 3% down. I didn't know that I could buy a house with 3% down, but if you have good credit, you can. And if you make it your primary residence. So I bought that house with 11,000, borrowed the 22, because when you call up and you say, how much can I have? Whatever that number is, say, yes, please. That's my advice. And I bought a second house with 11,000 down, moved into it, used the other money to furnish it, got it up and running on Airbnb, put it out there, borrowed the money again, and did it a third time. So that's how I manipulated that. The second really powerful 401k thing that I learned was when I met our friend, Mike Todd, who's been on my show. And he came to talk to the investors group about this thing called a self-directed IRA. And I was not the only one in the audience going, with my hand up, waving in the background, going, wait a minute. Are you telling me I can invest in real estate with my 401k without taxes or penalty? I need more of this. And this is the thing that I like people to understand. It's hard to ask questions when you feel like, maybe you're the only one who doesn't know. But number one, who cares? But number two, I partner with people, and you're a good example of this, who are willing. I partner with people who look like me, my finger quotes. And that means hungry, interested, learning, etc. Mike Todd met with me probably 3 or 4 times. At that time, I had $150,000 in my 401k. But in order for me to get it out, I would have to quit that job. So I went to him 3 or 4 times and said, explain it to me again, because I don't get it. And he had the patience to do it over and over and over again. And that's why when I did quit my job, I took that money, put it into that vehicle, and it still sits there today. And I do investments. I'm trying to think if part of that, part of it might be in the investment with you. I'm not sure. But that is just a way to grow wealth and to have control. And it also is what purchased my portion of third home, which is how we're able to travel the world in luxury. So,
yeah. You know what I love about that as well, Jen, is that's a second major financial thing you just kind of figured out is velocity of money. Like let me go borrow this $22,000, buy this asset, right? Put some income producing debt on it, right? Furnish it, rent it out, get it making money, pay it down. Well, now that money's back. You have that money back to use again, and you did it again and again, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you figured out economies of scale and velocity of money pretty much all on your own with the help of some experts along the way to use the tools. So it really is truly amazing that, most of the tools that many of us use to get started and really start taking the reins on our financial future, we all have access to, right? We have been set up, at least through conventional wisdom, to have these things. We just have to learn how to look at it as a screwdriver instead of a hammer or something like that,
Yeah. And you know what, when you bullet point my story, it sounds so much better. Like, economies of scale and velocity of money, all that good stuff. So I got to write that down. I think
I'll charge you small royalties.
Exactly. And I think the other thing is it's okay to keep asking if you don't understand. So cost segregation. So you and I both know what that is. You and I have both deployed that tool.
Yes.
Huge financial benefit tool for people in multifamily, self-storage, et cetera. Didn't know about it till a couple of years ago. Went to a conference, learned about it. And I was like, stepped in what? And called 3 different people, had them all explain it to me, went with the person who made me feel the best about it. A huge financial gain. Now, when I talk to people about cost segregation, I've heard this 3 times this week. They say, well, I've talked to my CPA about it, and he says it's really not worth it. I think you were on a Facebook string with me actually recently, or an email string where this happened. It's really not worth it. It's this, that. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to be blunt. Fire his ass, find another one. But again, you don't have to fire people, but I do think that's part of surrounding yourself with people who look like you. So if my CPA says, no, it can't be done, and I'm getting other information, I expect that professional to go out and to learn it if they want to keep me as a customer.
Yes.
So I found a CPA who looks like me. He invests, he understands it. And what I love about him is if he doesn't understand it, which has happened a lot, like we talk about, now I'm going to blank on it, the sales trust, deferred sales trust.
Deferred sales trust.
I go to him and I'm like, this is what I heard, because I'm an inch deep and a mile wide, which I have gotten flack for my entire life, but you got to go where your strengths are. So I learned just enough, and I go to an expert and I'm like, I really expect you to go find this out and understand it for me. So, I guess I don't know where I'm heading with this, but I see that if people are listening to us talk and they are hearing all these words, it's really intimidating. And the most important thing is just don't be overwhelmed by it. And if somebody's trying to overwhelm you, you're talking to the wrong person.
That is absolutely true. And you know what? Never be afraid to be an inch deep and a mile wide, right? Because go look at, Elon Musk or any of these really notable entrepreneurs, right? They have no idea what engineer in 3B is doing, right? Nor do they
Mhm.
care. They're looking at the big picture, and they pay people, professionals or employees or whatever, to handle the details in every little pillar of a situation, right? So
Yeah.
there was nothing wrong with that. And honestly, I prefer it. I struggle with it because I was an engineer and I was a mile deep. So becoming
Right.
a mile wide is much more difficult, but I love
Right.
that. You kind of segued into fear there a little bit. And I know, just the experiences that you've been through, Jen, whether it's from being the one to ask the question when you're, the one in the back of the room, kind of standing out, or just overcoming fear to get out of whatever muck you're in. Like, how do you do that? Cause like, I don't know, I'm going to bullet you again here. Like, you have some mindset mastery, whether you know it or not, but to be able to overcome the situations that you have and come out on top and better, build back better every single time. Right. I think I may have stolen that from a recent,
You might have
you know,
a recent campaign.
yeah. But you were able to build back better and fearlessly. Like, how did you do that? What can you say about, overcoming fear?
Well, sometimes overcoming fear is just having your ass handed to you. So I get that question a lot. You get fired from your job, you get fired from your marriage, you get fired. All of a sudden you're like, well, I might be afraid, but I got no choice. I think the other, which is more relatable, is things like when I joined the real estate investor group, which is where I met you. I think I joined several years before you came, but walking into that room at the time, which was big, like 600 people, and they're all talking a language that I don't talk. I'm not saying that that's not intimidating. Um, I think and it's not really fake it till you make it, because I kind of hate that story, but I do think it is. If you don't have the courage, just borrow it. So, Beyonce has a stage name, Sasha Fierce, and she legit puts that on. She puts it on. Nicole Kidman is an extreme introvert. She puts it on. So put on your Sasha Fierce and walk your ass in the room. Um, I think it's really like there's something to be said about confidence as well. And I have I exude a lot of confidence.
You do.
And I think even when I don't have it, and I think it's attractive to people, meaning like, I can talk to her, whatever, but I also lead from vulnerability. I'm also perfectly fine saying, I have no idea what I'm about to ask you, but I know I need to ask. And I'm hoping you'll be gracious enough to explain that to me. That happened to me today in a phone conversation where I just called and just said point blank, I've been told to connect with you. I'm not really sure how it works. Can you please walk me through it? So I think that's really it, kind of borrowing it, kind of forcing yourself out the door to do something. And I and you probably don't believe this, I'm actually an introvert. I'm an outgoing introvert. Yeah, I know you're shaking your
I don't
head.
believe it at all.
I know. I know. It takes me, yesterday I had 3 interviews. One was probably the biggest one I've had so far, was Jordan Harbinger. He has 10 million downloads a month, 10 million
Yes.
downloads a month. And I was sweating, and I had several
He
other
was quite a
interviews.
mentor to you, wasn't he? You shared his program with me, actually.
Yes, he
Yeah.
is. He is a mentor who didn't know me. Again, so is Oprah. I'll go ahead and drop her name too, so she'll show up in the show notes. Um, but by the end of the day, it was 8 o'clock at night. I ate my dinner. I went in the bedroom. I shut the lights off. Because it's a lot. It's a lot. So going to those meetings, everything else. But I just encourage people, one foot in front of another. Find one person you can connect with. I mean, you and I connected in a parking lot 2 years before we worked together.
We did.
And there were many, many, many conversations before we worked together. But really, I was just working on you to quit your job. So
Yeah, you worked on me a lot longer. Really, what she told me was put your big girl panties on and get out and go invest, So
I was like, you're such a plant. You are an engineer. You're such a planner and organized. Even this show, everything that you do.
Oh,
so
you
planned.
chastised me. Yeah, organizing this show, it took me months to launch it, right? It took me months to quit my job because I was like analyzing it to a T. And I didn't follow the plan at all, by the way. I just burned the boat and left, but it's what
But
you
there
have to
you
do
go.
sometimes.
Well, there's that style. And then there's me who's like building my parachute, but I've already jumped out of the plane. So I don't know. That's not a great business model either.
Well, we both landed safely on the ground, so they both work, right? All right. So as we get down to the last few minutes of the show here, I'd love to ask just a couple of questions that we ask every one of our listeners. Jen, what is your superpower as it relates to your business?
You know, I didn't think this literally until this morning or last night. Um, but I realized, and this has been true throughout my life, that people, I don't know if there's quality for this or a name for this, but people tell me things about themselves, very intimate, deep things. Some people in the elevator. Now with my show, I get emails that are 4 pages long with everything about themselves. And I'm so honored. And I think I give off a level of, you can trust me and I won't judge you. Probably. And that's even if they don't know my story. But if you know my story, you're like, well, she ain't got no place to judge from because of what she's been through. But I'm very honored and humbled by it. It just blows my mind away that people have trusted me with their financial secrets or truths, their marital, what's going on with their kids, et cetera. So I think that is a real blessing. I think it occurred to me when I met one of my husband's coworkers at the network, who he's known his entire career. My husband's a former hockey player, so this is a former hockey player as well. And in the first 10 minutes of meeting him, he told me things that Stu had no idea, very deep personal things. And he was like, how'd you get that out of him? I said, I have no idea. So I think that is a superpower, and I hope it is until the day I die.
If you're getting it out of ex-hockey players, I think it's a pretty good superpower. Yeah, I wouldn't envision them being very vulnerable.
Yeah,
You know,
true.
Jen, you have built quite a platform with the Micro Empires podcast and really talking about the notion that you don't have to be wealthy to build wealth. So not only can listeners go listen to your show, which will be in the show notes, by the way, but you're also launching an ebook, are you not?
I am. I have an ebook that if my branding person doesn't pull her hair out, I will get done. I have a book that's available right now on this site. It's much smaller, and I encourage people to do it. It's kind of just a workbook. This one is called "You Don't Have to Be Wealthy to Build Wealth," which really helps you walk through your own money culture, kind of assess, ask, and act, the three things I feel like you have to do in kind of any situation. So that is out. I'm expecting that to be out in April, and it'll be free, of course.
Of course. And where can people find that, Jen?
They can find that at www.micro-empires.com. And you can also follow me on all the platforms. I'm working on the Instagram. I'm an inch deep and a mile wide. Again, I've discovered the TikTok. I'm loving it.
I'm intimidated by the TikTok.
I'll tell you what, the TikTok is fantastic because you can be funny and in 1 minute spurts, and that's what people want. And I love Clubhouse. Clubhouse has been it can be, you have to harness the beast.
I agree.
It can be a really excellent tool.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Well, we kind of killed two birds with one stone. So now they know how to get in touch with you. The last thing is, what philanthropic causes are you involved in? That's one of our 4 pillars at Quattro. So I love hearing what everyone's involved in from a, give back perspective.
For me, it's really the one-on-one work. It's so I, through all the socials and everything else, you can certainly contact me, but you can write to me. You can ask to be a guest on the show. I'd like to do some round tables and things like that, really problem solving around money. But you can also book time with me for free, and I will walk through everything. Whatever you want to ask me, you can ask me. You can book time with me. I limit that amount of time, but you can certainly do it. People write me emails. I am doing an investor intake on my website as well. But what I've found is that folks will reach out, they'll do the book, kind of walk through like, oh, this is where I am and these steps, and there's some real tools in there. And then they book time with me. They write me an email and we sit down. And some of these phone calls are from the minute I pick up the phone. It's, my business is cut in half. I just went through a divorce. I have $50,000. What should I do? Go. And I'm not a financial advisor, but what I am good at is the one-on-one individual. Let's take a full stock of where you are right now, because what you might need to do is nothing for the moment. You might need to just sit tight. So because I'm not a financial advisor, I'm not trying to make any money off of you on that. So I work on the one-on-one, and I'm also really focused, and the platform has shifted in this way as well, towards social justice and women's issues, because you cannot separate race, wealth, or gender. And we have a divide across all of them, as we all know.
We do.
And as white people at the top of that food chain, it is our responsibility to provide access, to give a hand up, to shine the spotlight on other people of races and everything. It is our job. And I have tried to do it throughout my career, but it'll never be enough. That's how I feel about that.
Wow, Jen, if it wouldn't mess up the recording, I'd tell you to do a mic drop right now, but that's incredible. I love the passion. So, this has been an incredible interview. Thank you so much for coming on. And based on what you just said, I would like to give you one more chance to fill in how people can get in touch with you.
Yeah. The best way, if they want to reach me directly, is to email me at jennifer@micro-empires.com. Certainly can reach out at the website, micro-empires.com. Follow me on the socials. I'm available, and I do get back to folks. It might take me a bit now as I'm getting more and more traction and folks are reaching out more, but I do. And it really matters to me. I think people feel like, oh, I'm bothering her, or she doesn't want to hear from me. I do want to hear from you. And I'm honored when they reach out. So I say that from the bottom of my heart. I really mean it.
And she really does, guys. So do it. You will not be sorry. All right, Jen. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me.
We hope this episode was insightful and brought value to your day. If so, please be awesome and leave us a 5-star review. Find out how Team Quattro can help you at thequattroway.com. Until next time, this is the Real Estate Runway Podcast.